on?
Hey, welcome back to Mindful Endeavors. I am your host, New Age Alchemist. And really quick, before we get into the discussion, quick disclaimer: we are not mental health professionals. We're not giving mental health advice or any medical advice. We do encourage the conversation to keep going around mental health. And this is basically us just discussing that subject, and we just kind of explaining what we see, whether personal experience or through our eyes that we see others experiencing. And we do encourage to seek help if you really need the help. Okay, so Matt, welcome. You are the Awakening Angler on Instagram, and I met you through the fishing community, of course, and you reached out to me because you do have a book, and I have the book right here, Catching the Drift. So, yeah, you sent me a copy, and I haven't finished it yet, but it's pretty good. I'm in chapter 3, and I do enjoy it because it's definitely it definitely hit hard. Even the prelude to before the chapters got started, like that one was just like whoa. So yeah, really quick before we continue with the discussion, just go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name's Matt. I wrote a book a short while ago. It is a fishing book. It's not really about fishing. It is, but it's a very high level. It's not a how-to book on how to catch fish in the pond or the stream that you live on. And it's much more of a metaphysical story of a main character who is just a little lost. So and he's looking for direction, and he just happens to be a fisherman. And so a lot of those moments, and I know you and everyone else here that has had those moments where you're out there, it's one-on-one, you're on the water, in the water, whatever. Those are those times where for me things open up. Things open up and things come in, and whatever it is, I'm in tune with my own frequency or vibration, and we get that information in. I just conveyed in my book how those moments make me feel. So yes, it's for fishermen, but it doesn't have to be. But I wrote it for other guys like us that fish, or girls. I don't want to leave them out, but I'm a guy, so I wrote it as a guy.
Yeah.
So that's who I am. And on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, it's the Awakening Angler, and we do a little more fishing on videos. I've been a professional fisherman now for over half my life. I'm a guide, charter captain, mate on Lake Ontario in upstate New York, the Salmon River, world famous Salmon River in upstate New York. I've been doing that since I was in my early 20s. So some of the content is very much like you said. You saw Instagram this morning.
Yeah.
It's because I was working a charter this morning. I was mating for a good friend of mine who's a captain, and it was flat calm. It was hotter than blue blazes out there today. There was no wind whatsoever, but the king's bit, and we've had really weird weather. It's finally stabilized a little bit. Those fish set up. We went out and banged them, and so you were looking at all my fish pictures of my clients out on the lake this morning, and tonight we're talking about our mental health and what other men can be doing with each other to uplift and encourage those conversations that I've been a guide for 25 plus years. I've had these conversations with other men in real world settings where you talk about anything and everything, from the meaning of life to who won the game last night and everywhere in between. I like those meaning of life questions. That's what interests me. But so do the other stuff. I just like those other questions.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I was fascinated by all the kings that you were catching. I was like, oh my god, and like I kept scrolling through the feed and I was just watching a bunch of them, and I was like, oh man, like that was a good morning. And I almost couldn't believe it. I was like, are these older pictures? And then it's like, no, they're all the same. They're all the same ones. And I was like, okay,
yeah, no, that's next Friday. That'll be the feature video of the week on my YouTube channel. I got home today, downloaded everything. The life of a social, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we. I never thought I would tote camera equipment and come home and scrub video, and my wife does all the editing. Um, we're like a whole little production crew in this house. It's funny, and we never thought we would do it, but it's fun, and we get to take what we do and I, if I could turn the camera, I'd look out the window. I mean, we live on the water,
Mm.
so between her and I, we fish every day, even if it's just off our dock, unless it's frozen solid in the winter. So fishing's what I do. So
That-
a lot of the content is the everyday when I have trips. The camera's always running, because you never know what kind of cool, crazy, amazing shit is going to happen when you're fishing. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, one of the things I definitely liked about your book right off the bat was the fact that, because I mean, like I've mentioned in prior episodes many times, this podcast is yeah, it's focused about mental health, but it's also about the outdoors as well. Just because those two things, you mean recently up until last year, I was super like, I mean, I always was interested in, but I wasn't passionate until like COVID hit. So I mean, I got tired of people not really talking about it so much on the mainstream, and I figured out, here's my chance to do something. Hopefully, it takes off or whatever. But I'm trying to do my part, right? And your book basically hits those two areas pretty spot on because, I mean, I'm not gonna spoil too much of the book, but like just in the prelude or in the beginning pages, like you see a vet that's about to end his service, right? And he's out fishing and he sees his grandparents. His grandparents were already passed away. So, and there's, and unresolved issues that he's had, right? So,
yeah,
it's about, I think it's, I mean, about the journey really, and, resolving those issues. And I think that is critical, especially for men's mental health, because I've talked about it before where, a lot of us men don't necessarily seek out help or don't necessarily vent the way we should, which does affect us more than we like to think sometimes. I've had a prior Marine on the podcast where he talked about how he was in a group for, for mental health and for therapy. And they were talking, and a bunch of the Vietnam vets were praising him because he was only in his 30s already seeking the help, whereas they did not seek it until just recently and they're already in their 60s. So they regret not seeking it sooner.
yeah, yeah. I'm an Army vet, um, and helping out as a vet, in my opinion, especially as a vet, if you're able-bodied and capable to help your fellow brother and sister vet, I think it's your duty. I think it's part of
Mm-hmm.
the oath we took, even now, all these years later. Um, it. I've given back um, to our local chapter here in Syracuse. Syracuse, New York, is where I'm at. Um, Clear Path for Veterans is an organization that works with veterans in a multitude of ways. It can be they offer classes on life skills, on coping with PTSD. A lot of these now are younger guys who saw and did things in the Middle Eastern theater that we've been in now for 30 years almost,
Mm-hmm.
that they don't know how to cope with. I mean, this was the same stuff. I can't imagine the guys that came back from World War II or Vietnam or Korea or any other place,
Mm-hmm.
because you've seen and done things in the name of whatever, a flag, a concept, an ideology that you can't undo. And thank God that more and more of our younger vets now are acknowledging that and shining a light on the elephant in the room and saying, I got stuff going on and I don't know how to handle it. And can somebody tell me how to handle it? Can somebody give me a positive, uplifting experience that instead of drugs or alcohol or whatever other addictive, inherently bad thing, to fall back on. And a lot of these guys are now And some of these programs are involving fishing in the outdoors, hunting too.
Mm-hmm.
Hunting's a little different, and I'm a hunter all my life, professionally as well. Hunting's a little different, but with a fish, like you can catch that fish and have all of the everything that goes along with it, and you can also let it go.
Mm-hmm.
You can swim away, and that's an amazing cathartic feeling all in itself. And so a lot of these groups, Wounded Warriors, we've all heard of. Take a Soldier Fishing is around the country. Project Healing Waters, which is through Clear Path for Veterans here locally. I donated. I called them, and I do drift boat trips for steelhead and salmon fishing on a world famous Great Lakes river. And I was donating one free trip for 2 guys every week, and it didn't go as well as I'd hoped, and it didn't last as long as I wanted it to, but it was only for vets. And 2 vets every week, they picked from their group, and they came out fishing with me for free. And we had a great time, and we all bonded and had that camaraderie again that the brotherhood of veterans has. And I think those situations in fishing allow us to help each other. So you said when COVID hit, you were called to help other people, and men especially. You're a man. It's natural that you would identify with other men and say, man, I'm going through some shit. I'd like help, but I'm also mindful enough to realize I'm going through it. So maybe I can help you. Even just become aware that you might want to go and seek advice. I mean, if your car was broken, you would ask your buddy who knows how to fix cars, can you fix my car? If my psyche is broken and you have made it through it, you might be able to help me make it through it.
Yeah.
That to me I love that. I do that. I believe in that. That's a lot of what my book talks about in how to do that for yourself if you're afraid to ask anybody for help.
Yeah. No, yeah, because I mean, I mean, I can't even fathom what the problems that a combat vet would have, like you said, and all the wars that we've been in. I know me personally, like I know what depression feels like more or less because of COVID, because my family was in a different state and I couldn't fly over there, and I was worried that they weren't being able to buy food because grocery sales were flying, like grocery stores, like they were just running out of stuff.
Oh.
So all that stress, and then being inside, not being able to have any contact with anybody else, that's when I realized like how important the sense of community really is. Which is like, like, I mean, all the programs you talked about, I mean, they kind of like promote that, like you all go fishing together, you have a good time, like you said. And I think that's what's really missing a lot of days, just a sense of community. And I always talk about, like, I mean, you don't necessarily have to be the best of friends, but as long as, you get along, respect each other, and, every once in a while you have good times, like that's all that really counts, really,
Sure.
And,
just got your back.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Somebody's got your back.
Yeah.
That's a great feeling, and I agree with you 100%. I think that it's a noble situation to realize and have the desire to want to help another human being, and that's all. And you don't have to be a vet to appreciate the benefits of that time on the water with somebody. You don't have to be that. Just the fact that you have enough similarity to be in the same place at the same time speaks volumes, and that there's a connection there, and that connection is powerful, and it allows especially men who are hesitant to ask for help because it could be an attack of your own masculinity or whatever going on. None of that's the case. I mean, it takes a stronger man to ask than not. And cliche as that may sound, it's the truth,
Yeah.
Stop and ask for directions. You're not going to die. You're just asking for directions. You don't know which way to go. Somebody is offering to tell you, and you don't. I don't mean it. I shouldn't say that. We're not trying to tell anybody anything.
Mhm.
We're just simply saying, here's some options that might be right for you. And no one is going to think less of you by any stretch of the imagination if you take one of those options.
Yeah, and most importantly, we're encouraging people to talk about it. Like, I mean, it all starts with talking about it and acknowledging that there is a problem, right? You can't really know what to fix if you don't know that there is something that needs to be fixing. So, at the very least, we know that, like I said in the disclaimer, we're at least what I hope people get out of this is one, learn like how like this issue of mental health is multifaceted, and it's certain things may hit men harder than women, and certain things may hit women harder than men,
Sure.
and they all need to be discussed in a nuanced way, because it's just having a quick discussion here and there is not good enough, and it all comes down to like our attention span and how much time we spend. Like when we see like a study, we see the headline and that's it, and like we don't even spend like 2 minutes to see like what how they got to that process, how they got to that study or that conclusion, and it's really bad. And like that's kind of why I started this to begin with, because I really do want to talk about these things, and I'm learning a lot through the different guests that I'm having on. And I'm hoping that people can see like, oh well, maybe the outdoors is an option. Like maybe I can learn how to fish, maybe and like different soft skills that you learn from fishing, hiking, swimming, or something that's in the outdoors that's as simple as just camping or something like that, that you can carry throughout the rest of your life and in other aspects of your life as well.
There's more to there's more to our life than just what meets the eye, and wherever your surroundings are, what meets your eye. And you can, stepping outside your own comfort zone a lot of times is critical to opening yourself up. I mean, how many times have you heard people say, oh, I want to change in my life, I want to do something different, but then they never do anything different.
Mm-hmm.
So how do they think that change is going to come about if you always do the same thing the same way? That you only take this level of a chance, never this level, always down here. And so you got to be willing to try something in it. And if it's your life that you want to change positively, it's going to require effort. There simply is no reward without effort.
Yeah, nothing worth having is comes easy
or free.
Yeah, or free.
I mean, and so listen, I love these conversations. I love these conversations. I'm already so happy that I'm here with you this evening, because I love good conversation, and that's all. And like you said, COVID did things to us as a civilization, this whole planet, but certainly in this country, did things to us psychologically that we may not know the ramifications the rest of our existence. I mean, really,
Yeah.
If you want to go there, like, we're coming through a period of time that is unlike any in the history of this planet. And certainly in the, history of this country.
Yeah, because I mean, like something is like a lockdown, and and like this, obviously we're not getting into politics because this is not a political podcast, but like when we look at the lockdown, the unintended consequences of that happening, where people were isolated without knowing, okay, what needs do they have? Like, how is this person mentally healthy, mentally stable to be able to lock down for 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever? Like, we didn't ask those questions going into it.
Yeah. Yes, we didn't ask, and you're right. I don't really care about politics,
Mm-hmm.
But the timeline of actual factual events that have taken place throughout the course of this thing is Like how can we ever gauge what has happened?
Yeah.
And again, selfishly and microscopically is a citizen of the United States of America, which you and I both are,
Mm-hmm.
then our country was based on certain unalienable rights that in the blink of an eye, we were told that we've deemed that your rights are not as important as public good. And so in lieu of that, we're taking your personal rights away. Don't worry about the whole thing, one nation under God, all of that fun stuff, that we're founded on. In this moment of crisis, which we think it's a crisis, we're not 100% sure. We're going to take everything away and take all the other innuendo out of that statement and then try to cope with it mentally. Man, woman, child, whatever race, religion, whoever you are, cope with everything that we know just changed.
Yeah.
And we were told and that we were forced to lock ourselves in our home.
Yeah.
No one could have possibly known what was going to come out of that. It's amazing that any of us are still alive, not from a virus, but from each other. Because
and there was like some towns that had more either suicide attempts or actual suicides, than they did COVID deaths, and it was because it wasn't really talked about a whole lot. Because again, we didn't go into it asking the questions that needed to be asked, and here we have all these unintended consequences of, kids being abused because they have to stay longer in their abusive households, kids going hungry because their only meal, or the only way of getting food, was going to school. Different things like that. And it's because all that stuff, like hunger, economic uncertainty, just lack of human contact, lack of just having fun, lack of mental decompression, all those things, and some people faced all of them at once. And, it was, for some people it might've been a little too much. And for some people, you never know what damage is done to them psychologically. We still haven't really addressed those kind of, questions or concerns.
I don't think anybody came through it unscathed. I mean, really, I don't think anybody just breezed through it and it didn't affect them one way or another. We were all affected. And in some way, at some point, even the most, narrow-minded person would have to say, what's going on? How do I deal with this? What does this all mean? And so now more than ever, I just think, and I'm sure people think, oh, that's so dumb. The guy's talking about fishing and how it helps. I don't care. I don't care. It's not dumb. Like you said, and it doesn't have to be fishing. Go take a walk in the park. Go out into nature and just let yourself be out there and see what happens. How many people do you see walking around the park on a beautiful day that are pissed off and frowning?
Not many.
I've been a professional fishing guide for over half my life. I can't ever remember seeing someone miserable and unhappy reeling in a fish. I just don't ever remember, So if that's something that people are never unhappy doing, why don't we do more of it? Why don't we do more of that and less of what is just making us nuts? And even if that's just sitting in your own head, scared.
Yeah, because I always say that we were never meant to be in concrete jungles, like, as humans. Like, we never were meant to be that way. Granted, like anything else, we've adapted. I mean, we've adapted to using an iPhone. We're never meant to use an iPhone, right? So, but the one positive though that I did see was like, because I didn't get into fishing until last year, and I've had a pole for like the longest time. But I finally was like, I looked at the pole and I was like, okay, the only thing I can really get to is a park. So, and there's some parks there's a lot of parks here that have ponds that have fish. All right, let's go out there. I looked stupid in the beginning because I didn't know what I was doing, but at least I knew how to cast. But then eventually, I was able to, learn a lot. And then once I started the fishing stuff on my Instagram, I started meeting more people, and it got even better when I, started the podcast, and, people like, are reaching out that they either want to be on it or they enjoy it. And I do like that a lot. So it's great that there's positives out of that, because, a lot of times when you hear about, social media, you might hear that's negative because, makes it easier for cyberbullying or whatever. So
yeah, it in some ways it would suck to be a teenager right now. I kind of feel bad for him. I've got one living in my house. My son's 16. My two girls are in their early 20s. They don't know any other way. I don't want to be the old guy sitting on the porch. I'm 50. I remember when my school and school district got the first computer in the library, and it's not like what we're doing today. It was really just an electric typewriter. It was a word processor, and everyone was like, oh my God, look at this, and then when that stupid first game came out, it was like Pong, you're like, we were just mesmerized by that. And this was 1985. My kids don't know any different, any of it, and without perspective, you lose some of that, and you were talking about, you've only been fishing for a year. God bless you. They said that the fishing industry was the largest positive increase in all of the economic world category during COVID, because all of a sudden people didn't have anything else to do. Like, you couldn't go and do anything else, but the outdoors was still open because it was outdoors, and the water was still there and the fish were still there doing their thing. And like, you couldn't go into it. You couldn't buy tackle last summer.
Yeah.
It would have been worth more than drug shipments from a foreign country. I mean, it just, like, you couldn't buy it, and everybody wanted to go fishing because fishing's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, and they were in a time where they really, the human race really needed some fun. And this whole social media thing is interesting. And Instagram, you touched on it, and that's where we met. I love Instagram, and you talked about you added fishing and got into the fishing community. I absolutely am in love with Instagram. My wife and I started it 4 months ago. I'd had an account for like a year. I think I had like 13 followers, and I didn't do anything on there. We just went over 2,000 here the other day. And I talk to, on a regular basis, people from all over the planet who are fishermen. And we talk to each other about fishing stuff because it's universal, and I absolutely love the fishing community on Instagram. It's been so much fun. I have Facebook too, but Facebook's different. It's not as fun. I don't know why. I don't know what makes Instagram fun, but the people are great. I haven't had any, keyboard cowboys or anything like that, and the thing about it is too, and I said this to a guy the other day, I don't care what fishing topic you want to bring up. There's no absolutes. So whatever you want to say that is the absolute only way to do something, I can tell you that that's not true. And so someone else has another way of doing it. So that doesn't make you right or wrong. And you can't preach to me that you're right and your way is the only right way. There's a beauty in that. So a lot of times when you see these guys arguing about stuff, what are you arguing for? Let's just talk about fishing. You do it one way, I do it the other way. Okay, great. Because none of it's provably right, one way or another.
Yeah, and you can easily tell who's really open-minded and who is definitely narrow-minded when it comes to that. And I know me specifically, right off the bat, maybe like 4 months into fishing, somehow I ended up just night fishing the entire, I don't know, from like, July up until like fall of last year, maybe a little bit towards the end of fall. and I was just night fishing. I was catching a bunch of fish at night, and people were like, "Well, how the heck can you fish at night?" Like I never heard of like, well, it just happened by accident. One day I was just out there fishing, and it was already like 10:30, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna cast one more time. I know it's pitch black, but I'm just gonna cast, and then sure enough, I caught a fish, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try it again, and that's how it happened, you know?
Right. Yeah. So we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to precipitate with the people that are the people that are going to need to hear this message that we're giving them are going to figure out a way to find us now, and they're going to listen to us and go, huh, those guys made sense. Why wouldn't I want to look at life at a little higher level and take myself out of the daily dramas that I'm the one that keep myself in, and maybe if I can undo some of those daily dramas, then it'll relieve some of the anxiety or tension that I have. And then maybe my mental health will improve just by doing one simple little thing. And then once you realize the results positively from that, then you're like, I wonder if there's anything else I can do. So there's it's all tied together. We're talking about good things, and wanting to do what's good for yourself first and foremost. What's I gotta think. I had it there. What's the thing the stewardess says to you when you're on the plane and they close the doors and they do the little deal with the oxygen mask that falls down, and they said, put it on yourself first so you can breathe, and then help all the people you want. But if you don't put yours on first, you're going to die, and then you can't help anybody. So it's the same. It's the same metaphor. Let's help each other out, but I got to take care of me first. And I don't mean that selfishly or egotistically. I mean that for my best and highest good as a being, and when all the way down to like my soul's purpose in this physical body in this lifetime, the lesson I'm supposed to learn so I can ascend up the stairway to heaven in progressive steps through each lifetime. Like that's what I mean by putting your mask on first.
Right.
Be a good person because you want to be for you. And that will just spill over to everyone around you naturally. Like you won't have to do anything, and you're doing what's best for you. And then in turn, you encourage the person next to you. So I'm encouraging you, and then you're going to go encourage somebody else. And it starts going like this, not like the thing from Happy Gilmore, but Kevin Nealon's pretty funny. But anyway, if we can just pull back out of our daily narrowness, not all the way, because that's our life, but do we need to be so wrapped up in what the Kardashians are doing tomorrow, to where we put importance on something like that really deserves no importance from me or you or anyone but them? It doesn't. So if you put that kind of attention on yourself in a positive, uplifting fashion, now, if you're a bright, shining light, it's going to shine on everybody around you, right? I mean, that's the nature of things. And so the people that are meant to hear that are going to hear it. And if you're not, you're going to have somebody go, what was that guy talking about? What?
No, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's an important thing that I learned, and I learned it through multiple ways. Fishing, outdoors, setting up an Instagram account, helping others setting up their Instagram account. Like, in order to put out good, I have to be at least at a point where I'm mentally mentally stable enough to be able to project the good. If I learned that also because if I'm not in the right space, then it's harder for me to project good because either something will set me off or something will, kill the rest of the energy that I had.
Yeah.
Then I can't really project any good anymore.
Yeah.
So it's definitely really important that, like you said, not necessarily in an egotistical or in a selfish way, but we do need to look out for ourselves. And I recently came across a term called high functioning anxiety, which I never even knew existed. But that's a thing, and part of the negative consequences of that is people pleasing, right? So it goes to what we're saying, like you have to acknowledge that if a person is not like is just taking advantage of you, you're not going to be able to do the most amount of good you can to the rest of the world. It's a lot of little things that trickle down from that, and I don't think a whole lot of people know, and I don't think it's even discussed a whole lot.
So in the, and it sounds a little even hokey to say it, but in the spiritual world, the whatever you want to call it, new age thinking, I don't know. It just seems to make sense to me, but there's a lot of that you just spoke about. The simple fact is that, so if you talk about love, okay, and I don't necessarily mean romantic love. I mean just love for seeing a whatever, something in nature, an animal, a deer, a fish, and appreciating it and loving that for what it is, or a tree or a stream, or, your fellow human beings on a human scale, not, again, has nothing to do with romantic love. How could you possibly truly love anyone else if you don't love this first? Like, if this isn't, if when you look at yourself and all you feel is hate or negative, then how in the name of all that's holy could you possibly think that you could then love someone else if this isn't good? If you're not good with yourself. And so there's where that self-love comes in, and that is numero uno. That's the top of the priority list. In the book, you haven't gotten there yet. In the book, the main character comes across an idea in his head that spawns from the process of the travel that he's just done, and it's an antonym. It's the opposite of the word deterrent. And a deterrent is something that keeps you from doing something, but it's a negative consequence. It's a negative connotation. Like, even though police are a deterrent to crime, there's a negative connotation to police. That maybe isn't the right example, but the character wanted something that meant the opposite, something that was good for the character. And he comes up with the term interrent, in meaning in a positive fashion with no negative connotation. And turrent is that same root word, and it's interrent. It's something that is for the highest good of the self, but then allows you to radiate that goodness out, which can't help but wash over everyone around you. Now, whether around you is in person or, right now we're doing this, 2,000 miles away. If we're both in the same space, then we're encouraging each other to do better, which we are because we're having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you did that in your everyday life and this light was shining brightly, that self-love, that's the number one pillar of the interrent principle. If you were going to do a book on just that, that's number one, chapter one. If you're not good here, none of the rest of it matters. You could drive, the coolest ride, the biggest house, all that stuff. But if you're still, that's just empty, it's meaningless. If you're not good here, and everything around you is going to reflect that superficiality because you're really not real here. That's all. And that's exactly what you just said. It's funny. We didn't talk about this before, but we couldn't have come around that conversation any better for me to say what I just did. And it's an important, critical part of the book, which is great. But that was a very organic way of getting there because it just is sensible.
Mm-hmm.
You know it. If you and I know it, we're not the smartest guys in the whole wide world. So if we know it, then there's got to be a whole bunch of other people that know it too. If then you got like our fishing community on Instagram, if you got all of those people that kind of get it together, naturally, I just think great things would happen. I don't see how anything bad could come from that.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree 100%. I mean, part of it is fixing the in-house. Like you said, the main thing is fixing what's within our borders, you know, in our mental health, our mental space, and making sure we're in a good position. Because a lot of times we get caught up in the materialistic, like even like something as having a big following, I would consider materialistic. Like,
yeah.
You know, like you got to really like take a step back and, you know, just stop, or not, I mean, not even necessarily stop, but just like I make the analogy that, you know, like if you're on a highway, you don't necessarily, I mean, yeah, sure, going 100 miles an hour will get you there faster, but at the same time, even if you go 1 mile an hour, like you're still making progress, but you're taking the time to see what's around you, the sights, and enjoying, and maybe even like appreciating certain things that you wouldn't appreciate if you're just constantly looking ahead and driving fast. Like it's one of those things that I feel like with all the stuff that's out there for us to digest mentally, like, you know, it's really tough for us to really focus on the little things that, you know, we would get gratitude from. You see all the stuff that we get bombarded with on social media. You see it on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. I mean, you look at Twitter, what it was before, like the very first time, it was just like, oh, I'm going out to eat, or I'm doing this, you know?
right.
Now that's what it was.
Now Twitter is the official news service of our country.
Apparently, yeah.
That's a little Captain Insano moment, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And because of like, you know, 240 characters, I think it used to be like 140 or like 100 or something, like 120, 240. How are you going to get a coherent thought across with 240 characters? It's impossible. Like it really is not. So we're learning to basically, I guess you could say, like we're learning to chew all this information, like, you know, do it in shorter amount of times and then just ingest it right away, versus actually chewing it, you know, make sure you're processing it correctly, you know. And I'm making another metaphor, but you know, you know, that's what we're getting to.
You're spot on as spot on could be. You know, we're this is enjoyable. We're so like-minded in the respect that we're looking at these things openly. We don't have a list of our personal platforms from A to Z between you and I, but we look at things the same way. You know, that's so encouraging at the very least, because then that means that individually we're not alone. Because I mean, I'm sure all of us think to ourselves, you know, when something goes through our mind, you know, am I the only one thinking that? You know, and there is strength in numbers. That's a natural human emotion and need and desire, is to be part of a group of like-minded people, because there's strength in numbers. You know, those kind of sociological not circumstances. I almost yelled over to my wife in the other side of the room, because she usually finishes my sentences for me if I get lost. What do you call it? What do you call it when there's things that are like, you know, what is it? God damn it. Anyway, sorry. I went off the rails right there, but I'm trying to think of a word and I can't think of it. It's not cliche. What is it? Stereotype.
There you go.
Stereotype. You know, the stereotypes are real. There are strength in numbers, you know, and we get a sense of belonging when we're around like-minded people. And then you have the human bullshit that enters into it, even in our fishing community, you know.
Yeah.
You're holding up a fish and you're like, I'm proud of it. I can take my picture and I want to show people because I am proud of it. And then you got the, negative Nancy's that are going, oh, you're not holding it right. You're not, they just want to find something to complain about. That's the same person in the grocery line in front of you, that's got 27 items in the 7-item checkout. And they're like, oh, I should do this, and don't say anything to me, but I'm going to say something to you if you were doing it. Because, get over yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, get over yourself. We got bigger fish to fry. Oh, there's a metaphor for you. We got bigger fish to fry talking about real things. Let's not beat each other up over somewhat made up things, less important on the big picture of things. That's all.
Yeah, I think what the more I do this podcast, the one thing that definitely stands out to me the most is probably patience. Yeah, it goes back to the attention span thing because it's just our attention span is shortening ridiculously, like small. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it was that of a goldfish. Like honestly, it's ridiculous because we don't have the patience with another person like anymore. We don't have the patience to go through information anymore. We just want it quick, done, that's it. You look at I think YouTube, it promotes videos the most that are within I think 6 minutes to about 15 because I don't know if they've done the research and that's what the golden amount it is for people to actually they'll keep their attention span and they'll keep them engaged because and I'm a victim of that myself. I've seen certain tutorials on fishing that are an hour long and I'm like, no way, I'm not gonna watch this, and I'll favor the ones that are 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Yes. I agree with you, and I do the same exact thing. The thing that I have come to love here in the last month or two, I don't have TikTok, but it's Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts because you're like this. Everything's instantaneous. I fall into that same trap sometimes, and the same thing. Even if there's something, I love YouTube. Instagram and YouTube are really a sweet spot for me that I didn't realize I was looking for. I always make the joke, if the ancient Egyptians had YouTube, imagine what other cool shit they could have built. If they built the pyramids in the Dark Ages, imagine what they could do if they had the technology we have now. But stuff like that is attention span is funny.
Well, okay.
We don't have an attention span for ourselves, dude.
Yeah.
We don't have for our own mental health. We don't have the attention span for ourselves.
Or the patience.
Yeah. And it's ourself. It's our mental health. It's our peace of mind. It's our happiness. It's our life. We don't have the patience to do that or the desire to put a little effort in. You'll work 60 hours a week so you can have a brand new Mercedes, in a nice house, but you won't spend 15 minutes a day just doing something that's just good for you, that really is good for you, not just some shit you've made up and said, oh, I'm today this is good for me and I'm going to do this. No,
Or how about this? So in LA, there's a Cuban restaurant called Porto's. There's a bunch of people that will wait 30 minutes to an hour for whatever they want to get for there, but they won't spend 20 minutes reading 10 pages from a book.
Yep.
It's it's one of those things where reading. I'm learning that because one of the things that I'm kind of doing is there's something called the 75 hard challenge, which one of the requirements for 75 days is to read 10 pages from a book every day. And I've been reading stuff for my work and different things, and I've been reading your book as well. But I see the value in reading, and just taking the time, because it's not just about so much ingesting something, right? It's just about sitting down, clearing your mind, and absorbing something else. And I think that helps a lot. I personally believe that several people in society are afraid of being alone with their thoughts, which I feel like we have to be a little bit more in the sense that so we can have control over what takes place in our mind.
You want to watch people, you want to play a game. Remember, you're a little young, but do you remember that game show, Name That Tune? And the point of the game show was they would play, you would bet, basically you would bet on how many notes of a song it would take you before you knew what song it was.
Mm.
And so it was how fast could you pick something up? Imagine trying to. So when you read something, your imagination is setting the scene that what you're reading, and it's not visual, because visual is cheating. Like it turns people into zombies. You're like, because you can watch something and you don't have to think about it because you're seeing it. When you read something, you have to visualize it. And I say you don't have to. That's what happens. And that's the joy of it, because as an author, I wrote that book. The greatest compliment I've had, and this has been repeatedly actually, and is that people have told me multiple times, as soon as I started it, I couldn't put it down. And I read it from start to finish in one sitting. And
wow.
I'm just blown away by that. And I hear that. Now, my book's not terribly long. Don't get, it's not like that. I mean, it's a short book, but I wrote it. I wrote the story so you could see it. I saw it as I was writing it, and I wanted to write it so people could re-see what I saw. And it and that's different. It changes things. And that's really cool. I haven't heard of that. It's 10 pages a day for 75 days.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a fitness and mental challenge, but yeah,
that's awesome. That sounds and you can't be physically fit without mental fitness too. You can't. It's got to be a trifecta: body, mind, and soul. Then you're talking about if you're in the upper echelon of all three of those things, now you're really grooving. If anybody can hit that sweet spot where you got bing, 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 that's what we all should aspire to.
It's a little funny to me because, like, again, something I learned through this, through the journey of the podcast, like you have like physical health, fitness, you have financial health, all these different things, and they all influence mental health. But and you can do with one of the things, right? Like if you're not physically fit, quote unquote, that's not necessarily the end of the world. If you're not financially fit, again, it's not necessarily the end of the world, because it depends on how you're, living your life and how the other three aspects are, or the other aspects of health are. But if your mental health as a whole is off by just a little bit, it affects everything else. Like it's like a weird snowball effect, like when it comes to mental health specifically.
And it's kind of weird. It's always negative.
Mm-hmm.
And it really can only be negative. If some part of your life is askew, it's going to affect you negatively. That's just the way it is. I mean, people could argue that, but you're right. I mean, it's always negative. Why do human beings have an easier time believing negative as opposed to positive?
That's weird.
It's true though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I don't know why, and I'm guilty of it too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, superhuman, and I do, I don't fall prey to all the other things that humans do. Of course I do, but why is it that it's easier to believe if somebody tells you something negative, whether it's about yourself or someone else? It always seems easier to believe that than to believe positive. If somebody gives me a compliment, hey, I loved your book. I immediately am like, oh God, I don't know how to handle that. It makes me uncomfortable. I'm anxious now. What do I say? Instead of just going, thank you. That's wonderful of you to say. That makes me feel very good. It's just easier to, I know I do it all the time. It's just easier to believe the negative. The fact though that we're talking about it is a step up already. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, why do I always want to believe the negative about someone? Somebody at work, whatever. And if you're just mindful enough to stop and ask yourself those questions, you're already so much ahead of the game. That's the point of it. Being mindful, recognizing the traps that are all around us that contribute to either less or more of your mental health, positive or negative. We have the power to affect us. I finally got to a point, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 months ago, where I turned the news off. I haven't watched the news, and I know enough, but I can't listen to that every day. I couldn't. And that whole COVID thing, when it started, man, I listened, and because we were locked in our homes for 2 weeks. Remember, everybody said just 2 weeks. Anyway, I watched those things every day, the briefings and all the everything, and you didn't know what to believe. It was all negative,
Yeah.
no matter what side you thought you were on, whatever side of the aisle or of the issue, no one knew what to believe because everybody said the same thing in a different way. And you had no idea what to believe. And how could that not affect you? How could that not affect you negatively? So I turned it off. I'm like, I'm done.
Same, because one of the things that did it for me was like, and again, we're just talking about like chronological events that happened and they're factual events, right? It took, the media, CDC, all government or organizations like that are supposed to be around health. It took somewhere like near 5 or 6 months after we started locking down to even talk about certain things you can do to get your best to increase your chances of surviving this. Like, getting adequate sleep, the amount of vitamins that, are proven to boost your immune system, things like that. And that's to me what got me, because again, it goes back to what we were talking about. Like as humans, we're just thriving on a negative, but we're not asking like, okay, well, what can I do? What changes can I do for whatever reason for the positive? Because we weren't asking that.
No, and shame on us collectively as a citizenry for not asking that sooner. That's a real thing. We shouldn't wait for our government to tell us what's good for us or bad for us. We should be actively doing that for ourselves, so the government that we have in place represents how and what we're feeling. Right. And that's there is the essence of democracy. It's a they work for us proposition as opposed to they tell us what to do.
Right.
They're supposed to be a reflection and not an authoritarian presence. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but it seemed funny what you just said, that it took them that long to talk about how you can cope with this stuff and what coping mechanisms there might be for you to get through this. It would make someone, if they were a conspiracy theorist, say, were they doing an experiment on us?
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to get down that rabbit hole, but yeah. But,
let's see how long they'll all collectively sit there and suffer before somebody in mass starts saying, we need help. How do we cope with what is happening? Because it's changed the world. It's changed the face of the earth. Yeah. So BC used to stand for before Christ in the annals of time. BC may now stand for before Corona, because they can ease every restriction they want. The impact of this is still forever with us. Those of us that have lived through it of an age that's cognitive of what's going on. And so it will be passed down for generations in this world. That seed of fear has been planted in all of us, and we had negative. We had people that we thought we had people that we believed had our best interest in mind telling us to be scared. And we believed them because we trusted them, because they're supposed to be the ones that look out for us. That's a really slippery circular slope right there. and we're talking about mental health.
Yeah.
And a lot of people figured out that fishing was a fun way to cope with things because, like, to circle back around, you couldn't buy any fishing tackle because everybody in the world went fishing for a year. Last summer vacation, most people will probably say we were fishing somewhere. So I guess it worked out in some ways, but there's a lot to it. And in this, God bless you for picking up this mantle and running with it, because listen, even what is our goal for tonight? How many people would we want to watch this and even for 1 minute go, those guys got a point? Like, I would settle for one.
Same.
I would settle for one person. If that turned into 1 million, my God, that would be the ramifications downstream of that one person going to 100 to 1,000 to 100,000 to 1 million. We saw how quickly a virus spread.
Yeah.
Around the world.
So, I mean, my whole goal for this every episode really is that whoever's watching, both new and concurrent viewers, to basically, to encourage them to talk about this, especially if there's something that's affecting them. If somebody goes, well, I picked up a fishing rod, or I picked up a compound bow, or I picked up cooking, I picked up hiking because this guest on your podcast talked about it and it looked like fun. That's just extra icing on the cake for sure. Yeah. So, and it also, and the benefit obviously for me is I get to learn about all these things, which is something that I was really into even before COVID, and it definitely sparked my interest. It only ramped up my interest after COVID. So, but so we're a little bit over the 1 hour mark. Any closing remarks that you might have, or anything you want to emphasize, or final thoughts?
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and it doesn't feel like this is a thing. You said it to me before. It's a conversation. We had a conversation, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and I appreciate you having me on.
No, I appreciate you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm supposed to. Yeah, you're probably waiting for me to plug the book, and I would love to. And you can get it. Where am I?
There you are.
Get it. I told you earlier, The Awakening Angler is who I am, and that's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. On Facebook, you can go to my Facebook shop, and you can buy the book. You can buy. I got a couple other things on there, T-shirts and stickers and whatnot, to show your support. I would greatly appreciate it. You can also go, if you're less comfortable with Facebook shopping, you can go to Amazon, and the book title is Catching the Drift, and you can just search in Catching the Drift, and it will pop up. It's the first one up there. So you can buy it on Amazon and on Kindle. So, as always, I really appreciate all the support. It's been overwhelming for the last 4 or 5 months since my wife and I really made a commitment to growing the YouTube channel and the social media presence. We took like I told you, we took Instagram from like 75 to over 2,000 in a couple months. And that was the easiest thing we've ever done, because it was just like we are tonight. It's just talking a little, fishing, and seeing who you connect with,
Yeah. Yeah. And my final thought, so obviously I definitely encourage you guys to get the book Catching the Drift again. Just because anything that you can consume to draw inspiration, and this definitely is more of a spiritual book, I feel like. And again, I haven't finished it yet, but it definitely is more a spiritual experience that you go through to this. And I think in some sense that will definitely help coping with mental health, and even then, again, drawing inspiration from it. I guess be mindful of where you draw your inspiration from, and make sure it's the right kind of inspiration as well, in a way that will benefit you in a productive and definitely in a healthy manner.
Yes.
Just keep those conversations going, and that's all I can really encourage.
Yeah, I agree. And all my book does is illustrate an analogy. This is how one person goes through it, deals with it, and comes out better on the other side. So
Yeah.
in that respect, it's a good uplifting read, because I think at the end most people go, huh, I like that. So that's all I can hope for.
Yep. So all right. Well, so everybody can find you on the Awakening Angler on either Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, right?
Yep, it's all the same. Just search any one of them, and I pop right up.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. Thanks again, Matt, for coming on and having a conversation with me.
Thank
And
you.
look forward to the rest of you joining for the next episode. And I'll see you guys soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.